Hi and welcome to JRDF's quick tip series on model assembly. Today we're going to show you how to do priming and buffing. Let's get started. Okay, so let's just start off with what you're going to need to prime your pieces. You're going to want some Montana spray primer. We prefer the Montana. We're not sponsored by them or anything, but we really like the finish that this gives, and it's really good. So yeah. A cotton bud, once again, our little friend for model making, some glue tack, some gloves, and a mask. Health and safety is very important. So let's get started with our first piece. I'm just going to put my gloves on. Just make sure that they fit okay and that they're nice and comfortable. Next we are going to take our piece. Probably don't want to do this before. So just prepare your cotton bud as before. We'll just take that fluff off. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the tack. Probably easier to do this without gloves. Should I take the gloves back off, do you think? No. Roll it into a little ball and make sure that you get that nice and warm. And then we're just going to stick it on the end of here. Just roll that on. And then just place it on the bottom half here. Quite like to make sure that I'm smoothing that down as well, just so that you've got a good nice contact and that's not going to blow off while we're filming. So now we're ready for paint. If you haven't used a spray can before, there's a few little tips that I can give you. First of all, what you need to do first is give it a really good shake. Now when your arm starts getting tired, keep going. I recommend that you do this upside down because then gravity is working to your favour. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is put my mask on. Right, so let's get started. And just do your first little, just to get rid of any excess aerosol in the can. Like good. And then starting quite far away from your piece, you'll just pick a side, very lightly, small sprays. And just make sure that you get a good coverage on that. There we go. Smaller pieces are a little bit more annoying, so just make sure that you're doing them really gently. I normally like to start from underneath and then just try and get all those angles. Now it's okay if you don't get into all the little tiny bits. The filler primer is really just for your kind of main surface areas. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So once again, we've got a small and very finicky, we've got a very detailed piece here and quite delicate along here. So once again, we're not trying to fill any gaps. The point of the filler primer is to get rid of these print lines. So let's get another shape. And just hitting that direction. So I'm going to spray this from the underside, just because you're going to see this piece from all edges, apart from that little bit where I've got my attachment point there. And there we go, I'm happy with that. So now that you've got your pieces primed, let's have a little look at what we've got to do next. So here you can see we have this spoiler piece. What we're going to need for this is your pieces. We're going to need some of this sandpaper that quite a well used bit of sandpaper is quite good for this because it's already, as I mentioned earlier, the grit's gone down a little bit, so that's going to be really helpful. And as you can see on here, we've got some raised pieces, there's these lines here. So really what we're just aiming to do is get rid of any sort of little print lines that that might be on the model piece, just to kind of help that final coat shine. So let's just get started on a really light sand. This particular method is really, really good on your sort of bigger, flatter surfaces. So it's important to say at this stage as well, we don't want to just sand the paint away, and we definitely don't want to be sanding into the resin. The filler primer is just to take away any of those sort of light imperfections from the print. So I'm just going in with my circular motion. My sandpaper is dry at the moment because I just want to start to see very, very lightly kind of what's going on underneath the paint base. So as soon as you start to get an edge like this, try and avoid that edge, because that means that we're going to be sanding away the resin, and that's not what we want. I also find that a nice sharp edge on your sandpaper can help just cut into some of these lines. I'm being so very gentle, very gentle. I also find at this point as well that I really like a smaller piece of sandpaper. I feel that that gives me just that little bit more control when I'm sanding, and you can also fold it into a point if there's any sort of little areas. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just folding that edge, and I'm making sure that that's really as sharp a point as I can kind of get on that, and that's just going to really help me get into the detail, those areas, without taking too much off. So there we go. And I'm going to go around all the detail areas first. As you can see, that's coming away really nicely. I probably won't take any more off than that. If you look really close, you can start to see those little print lines. You're not trying to take those away. The filler primer's already done the job there. So we just want to give that top section just a little bit of a tickle and just get everything nice and smooth. Now we are going to be doing a wet sand after this. So after its second coat of primer, this is only its first coat at the moment. There we go. And you'll start to see these print lines become a little bit more obvious now. Just keep in mind, don't be tempted just to sand it all away until it all goes grey. That is not what we're trying to do here. We're just smoothing off that surface. And then when you get a nice sort of flat bit, you can just pop your sandpaper onto that. Give it a little run over. You can feel yourself how much smoother that is when you get to that point. You'll see that there's these little detail sections here as well. They're raised. So that's it's a slight challenge, but nothing that we can't handle. So using that same technique, just getting into those edges very gently, not taking much away at all. I'll just keep showing you that just so that you can kind of see how those print lines are coming through. Now this feels absolutely smooth, and you can't feel the print lines at all. So it does look, it looks quite a mess, but trust me, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're looking to do. I did do a little piece earlier, so if you bear with me. So this is when it's had its first sand. I've not done a wet sand on this yet. We're going to save that for the second coat of primer. But if you can see here, I'm really happy with that finish. It's really smooth. I've managed to keep my detail sections. Okay, so now we're back. I've just given this its second coat of the primer, and that's the print lines all the way. So we're just left with some really lovely details on there. I'm really happy with how that's come out. So before this gets its paint treatment, we're just going to give it one last little wet sand just to kind of buff that up a little bit, because we want a nice smooth surface, especially if you're going to be painting any kind of metallics. You really want that to get that nice high shine. So I'll move this a little bit more. So I've got my little bowl of water here. I've got my sandpaper, the same sandpaper that's been supplied in the kits, and I'm just gonna give it a little rub. It's quite good at this stage as well, just to have something that you can kind of dry it off on. I'm very much an advocate for using my sleeves, but that can mean that you get a little it can be a bit much. You can get a little dirty. If you're like me, that's not something that bothers you. But if that is something that bothers you, even just something like a little bit of kitchen towel. I wouldn't recommend toilet paper just because that can kind of release quite a lot of particles, which you don't really want mixed up into your workstation. And then just here, we're just going to go for these nice flat surfaces. Maybe use a little smaller piece here. There we go. So just looking at these flat surfaces, still keeping that nice circular motion. I'm going so lightly with this because we're really, really not trying to remove any of that paint. It's just buffing the surface. There we go. That's starting to come up really nicely now. You can see how smooth that is. And holding it up to the light when it's wet really gives you a nice idea of what that's going to look like when it has a little bit of shine on it too. So let's just keep very gently, not removing the paint. Don't take away the paint. Now don't worry if you do end up taking a little bit away, the resin is paintable. But if you are concerned about it, or you want like a nice even white coat, you can give this another little going over afterwards, if you wish. So this is the main section that I'm just focusing on here. This is really where we want that nice finish with the high shine. There we go. Fantastic. So there we go. And that's still got a nice thin layer of paint on that. And it does look quite dark at the moment. The camera's not really doing it much justice. So there we go. That is your piece ready for paint. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Thanks for watching. Hi, and welcome to JRDF's Model Kit Assembly Boo. I'm done. I'm fucking done. Right, push the buttons.